So, this is a crazy and definitely scary experience. Happened a couple of months ago, and today I decided to tell the world about it. I was about 17 when this took place, and it was around 7 p.m. I had just left my dad's apartment after spending the weekend there, something I did quite often. I lived with my aunt because my mom passed away a couple of years ago. To get to my aunt's house, I had to take the bus from the bus station downtown, and to get there, I had to take the bus from my dad's place. Fast forward to the bus arriving at the bus stop at my dad's location. The bus doors opened and I stepped in, paid for my ticket, and sat down. The bus was almost empty, except for me, the bus driver, and some homeless-looking dude in the back. I didn't think much of it since this is quite normal where I'm from. The bus ride to the downtown station was fairly normal and calm, and not a single person came on the bus. We arrived at the almost empty bus station, and I stepped out. Now, I knew I had to wait around 20 minutes for my bus to arrive, so I decided to go into a store that was on the opposite end of the station. At this point, I'd forgotten all about the weird-looking man in the back of the bus and just went on with my business. I found a few things in the store I wanted, paid for them, and left. When I came out of the store, the bus station was now completely empty except for one person who was standing in the middle of the street, just staring at me. To be honest, I got a little creeped out by this, but I didn't want to think that much of it. The person was probably just drunk or high. Next to the store is a small one-room building that is used as a waiting room, so I decided to go in there and wait. I sat down and pulled out my phone. From the position I was sitting in, I could scope out the entire bus station and see everything. I was looking down my phone and texting friends, glancing up every few minutes to see if my bus had arrived. About 5 minutes had gone by, and I glanced up and was shocked to see that the guy from earlier was still standing in the exact same position, and he appeared to be looking right at me. Not wanting to look at him anymore, I looked down at my phone again. A few minutes went by, and I looked up once again, and the guy in the street was gone, nowhere to be seen. I figured his bus must have come and he got on, but the weird part was that I didn't hear any bus. But once again, I didn't think much about it, and I went back to texting. I glanced at the clock on my phone and saw that it was time to go, so I got up, put on my backpack, and walked out. When I came outside, I looked around and saw that someone or something was standing about 13 feet away from me, and their back was facing my way. I felt a bit uneasy now, but decided to find out if the person, or whatever it was, needed help. So I called out, "Hello?" and "Excuse me." I even tried "Sir" and "Madame," but there was no response. What I decided to do next was probably the stupidest decision in my life, but I decided to go and put a hand on the person's shoulder to try get contact with them. I slowly walked over, inching my way closer with every step, and when I was about 2 feet away from the person and was about to put my hand on their shoulder, they turned around. The person revealed himself to be the man from before, the same homeless-looking man I had seen in the bus. He had this crazed look in his eyes, and before I knew it, he lunged at me, and I narrowly avoided it. I screamed and turned around to run away, and when I quickly looked back, I saw what appeared to be a knife in his hand. I screamed even louder and ran as fast as I could over to the bus which, luckily for me, arrived just now. I went inside the bus and told the bus driver what had happened, and we went over where I had seen the man earlier, but he was gone. This has by far been the craziest experience of my life, and I luckily never saw him again. I live in a relatively large city in Virginia that has a large university in the north side of the city. We have a rather impressive homeless population, especially near the university, and there's always at least one hanging out every single street corner. We have our fair share of crime, like any other large city. This happened to me while I was still in college, about 2012 or so. On our main busy thoroughfare is the main event building for basketball games, graduation ceremonies, etc., along with a huge campus, Barnes and Nobles, some restaurants, all of that. 3 lanes going both directions with a median in the middle. I was walking down one side of the road against the buildings going towards the bookstore, and a man, who appeared to be homeless, began to follow me. Keeping up with my new pace a few feet away closer to the street. He popped out a pretty large pocket knife and held it so that the handle of it was hidden by his jacket sleeve, but you could see the blade and heard it when he popped it open. He was grinning, and he started mimicking my steps, the length of my stride, and he'd stop when I would stop. It was almost comical the way he moved, like out of a movie. He had some pep in his step, kind of sliding his feet with each step, almost like he was dancing to the pace of us walking. He never said a word, just kept grinning and following and copying my movements. This went on for about 2 blocks until I stopped at the entrance of the bookstore and stepped up the 3 steps leading up to it. I made eye contact with him, and he stayed below. He didn't try to follow me in. Maybe he would have if I never turned to face him. Who knows? He suddenly turned in a rather dramatic movement and stepped out into the road between 2 cars that were parallel parked. Luckily, the traffic light right before he stepped out had just turned green, so the cars waiting hadn't yet hit the gas pedal to go. He stood there, just grinning until a car stopped in front of him, and the driver yelled at him and threw something when he didn't react to the blaring horn. I have no idea what this guy wanted, or what he would have done if it had been night, when the area is less populated. I used to reside in the city of Houston. I grew up in the suburbs, but moved inner city as soon as I could get away from the strip malls and chain restaurants. I moved to Inner Loop, Houston. The 610 Loop is a freeway that unofficially separates the metro core from the residential/industrial outskirts of the city to a small historic neighborhood, the Montrose district, that was almost attractive to college students, artist types, young people, gays, etc. Montrose is pretty socially liberal and probably the most out there Houston neighborhood, culturally speaking. Lots of cool antique rental properties and garden apartments for singles and couples in their 20s. But not the kind of area that most people can afford to purchase a house or have the space for a family. I was very young when I first moved to Montrose, so I ate it up. Dive bars, restaurants, music clubs, coffee shops, street fests, proximity to the museum district. It was great. But every pro has its con. Montrose wasn't super scary crime-ridden or anything, or at least I never felt unsafe there, but it was a little rough around the edges. Drugs were easy to come by, which meant a high concentration of drug users, obviously, and the behaviours they would often come with. Car break-ins were relatively common. My window got smashed twice in 4 years, which seemed about the average. there was a decent-sized homeless population to be berated by. Don't get me wrong, many of them were perfectly polite and harmless, but there were a good handful of the bold, shameless, and persistent ones. While muggings weren't the norm, to my knowledge, none of my friends ever got mugged, it was definitely important to be aware of your surroundings if you were out and about, especially if you were alone or if it was after dark. So one morning, about 8 AM, I'm heading off to work. I stop off at the drugstore on the corner next to my apartment to grab some juice and some cigarettes before I hit the bulk of my commute. There's typically at least one homeless guy hanging out in this particular pharmacy's lot at any given time, but it's not worrying. They're usually passed out and no trouble, just resting in the shade from the structure away from the hot sun. As I'm walking in, I see a grizzled, white homeless dude wandering around the far end of the parking lot, quite a ways from me. It seems strange, as they don't tend to panhandle here, and it's too boiling hot to be comfortable wandering around on the asphalt in direct sunlight. Additionally, I don't see any cars parked on his side of the lot, so no one's around for him to interact with, so his movements seem aimless and random. He sort of glances my way, but it's hard to tell from that distance if he's looking at me or not. From where I'm standing, it looks like his eyes are just randomly darting around, fixating on one point of the parking lot. Then he quickly strides to that empty spot, and then he finds another spot a few feet away to look and then to skitter to. I don't feel threatened, but I'm definitely aware of his presence and questioning his stability. I make it into the Walgreens undeterred and get my stuff, and wait in line to pay. I'm inside 2 or 3 minutes tops. I step out the exit and glance towards my car. I feel relieved when I don't see Mr. Crazy on my end of the lot, so I started to walk to my parking spot. I've made it about 5 or 10 feet from the store's exit. The car's another 20 or so feet away, when he appears, seemingly out of nowhere, and steps directly in front of me, blocking my path. He asks me if I have any money I could give him. He's older and pretty worse for wear. I feel bad for him, but I'm creeped out and in a hurry to get to work. I tell him what I often say to panhandlers, and it's usually true. Sorry, I don't carry cash. I step around him and keep walking, quickening my pace. I hear his footsteps follow me, just as quickly. From behind, he demands, "I know you have change." At this point, I'm rushing to the car, a hair away from breaking into a sprint. "Sorry, I can't help you," I loudly respond, without so much as glancing back toward Nutterbutton McGee, who's still in my ass. I hit the unlock button on my keys and have my arm out, ready to reach for the door handle. My hand slides onto the handle. I yank my car door open and jump into the driver's side of my sedan. Before I'm even seated correctly, I immediately grasp out to slam and lock the door. Too late. Psycho Sam is now facing me, standing in the space between the open car door and I, blocking it from closing with his entire body. My car was just your standard 4-door, so as you can imagine, I am now in awfully close quarters with the crazy. To make it even worse, he leans down so that his face is just about level with mine. His hair and beard are unkempt, his eyes are wild. As if I needed further confirmation, I didn't. This is not a sane individual. "Give me all your money." He didn't point any weapons, at least that I could see, or scream or raise his voice. He just sternly said the words in a matter-of-fact tone, as if this were the obvious directive and my compliance were a given. I was terrified, stared up at him for a second, not knowing what to do. In an instant, adrenaline slammed me, and instead of immediately responding to his demand, I kept eye contact with him on my left side while my right hand shoved the key into the ignition and turned. No, was all I could squeak. And, ladies and gentlemen, that was the day I ran over a hobo's foot. And I would do it again too, if I had to. Screw that guy.